Welcome to a new video. Today, we're going to review part of the vocabulary we learned last week, and we're going to talk about reflexive pronouns. So let's see. We have some words to the left, and we have some images to the right. You can see them here. All the images and the words. So I need you to match them. So if you want, you can pause the video. You can print the screen and print the page and do the exercise, or you can do it with me. So if you're going to pause it, you can pause it now. Good. So let's check. A burn. That's correct. That's the burn. A scratch. A cut. Stay in bed. Wash it. Good. If you have a burn, right, or an injury, mainly an injury, not for a burn that much. Eat too much. A broken leg. A bruise. And an accident. Okay, so we're set to go. So since we're in September, we are going to address a new topic with a new theme, more of an independence theme. So you'll see what you did, reflexive pronouns. So let's start here with these images. So let's say I'm Barack Obama, right? So I say, I look at myself. Why? Because I am looking at me, at myself in the mirror, right? Now, in the case of this one, this second image, we can see that in the mirror, she looks at herself, right? So you can see the girl looking at herself. Okay. So do you find out anything similar between these two images? You'll probably say yes, right? We have the word self, and we can see that the person or the subject is doing an action about himself. It's an action that bounces back to him or to her in this case, right? So let's learn about this. And to learn about this, we're going to talk, as I told you, more about independence in these days, just to take into account and be more patriotic. Independence fathers, right? Did you know that by yourself, you can promote the values of Guatemala, being fair, honest, and studying hard as Mariano Galvez did? As you know, he was very important. He studied in San Jose de los Infantes, and he also was a very good statesman, right? He promoted the independence. He was a big leader in this. Did you know that Dolores Bedoya was the only woman that took part promoting the independence of Guatemala, and that she went by herself calling people to support the independence of Guatemala on September 14th, 1821? Interesting, right? The only woman. Reason why she's taken into account as an independence mother in this case, right? Did you know that Pedro Molina established a newspaper himself, and he promoted the values of independence through that newspaper? So he's also a founding father. Did you know that the independence itself cost the life of various people that wanted it to happen before, but did not have sufficient support? For example, inside the country, there were different indigenous groups that fought also for their liberty. For example, here we have the example in Coban of Manuel Tot, who was, I believe, whipped to death because of his fight for freedom. Did you know that we have to fight to maintain the independence of Guatemala by ourselves and preserve it from any unloyalty, right? As our founding fathers did, we should promote and respect the values we now have as a country. Did you know that yourselves, you and your family, build a better nation by respecting the Constitution and teaching others to respect it? That's very important. That's why it's important to read it and to know it. Did you know that the Independence Fathers prayed to God by themselves before getting together to sign the Declaration of Independence from Spain? There were many religious people there signing the independence, and remember that since Spain was Catholic, the values of Christianity were immersed in it, right? So in a way, we can say that God was taking into account too. Now, going back to the slides, you're going to notice that each one has a word involved, right? For example, here you have yourself, herself, himself, itself, ourselves, yourselves, and themselves. And all these words have something in common. Can you notice what? Yes, you're right. They usually refer to the subject. If we're talking about Dolores Bedoya, we're talking about a woman. So we say herself, right? If we talk of you, yourself, it's an action you do for you, right? For yourself. In the case of a man like Pedro Molina, him or he, we use himself. Now, if you're talking about a thing or a group, like independence in this case, we say itself. If you're talking about a group in plural, ourselves. Did you notice a difference between the spelling of this word and the spelling of this one, for example? The ones in singular and plural? Yes, there's a difference. In singular, we use self, and in plural, we use selves. And as you can see, they all reflect or project themselves to the subject, to the person. The same thing here, Independence Fathers and themselves, right? So reflexive pronouns refer to that precisely, right? They reflect to the subject of the sentence, which is the same one. For example, I cut, who did I cut? Myself, with a knife. So the action is done to myself, right? To me, to I. In the second one, you hurt yourself with your bed. The same thing, yourself is referring to you. She scratched herself with the wall, same thing. He cured himself with the first aid kit. It, for example, a cat, went to bed by itself after dinner. We celebrated ourselves with a pizza. You congratulated yourselves after the game, and they respected themselves, respecting their country. So these are, as you can see, all sentences, and they are all affirmative sentences, right? Subject, verb, reflexive pronoun, and the complement. I reinforce myself, yourself, herself, himself, and itself. That's singular, right? And then we go with plural, ourselves, yourselves, and themselves. So here you can see reflexive pronouns, negative statements. So we have subject, now we have a negative form, verb, reflexive pronoun plus complement. So I'm using the same sentences. I'm only added didn't in this case because I'm talking about the past, about the independence and independence fathers, right? So I didn't cut myself with a knife, for example, or you didn't hurt yourself with your bed. Okay, so we can use didn't, did not. But if you're talking about present, you could say I do not, if it's a present action, or you can also use will for the future or other options you could use depending the tense you want to talk with. Since we're talking about past events and accidents or incidents or the independence in this case, you should use didn't. Notice that the verb is not with, like in the usual normal case in the past, they don't have ed, right? Or they are not transformed in irregular form when it's a negative sentence. So let's see, yes, no questions. Did I cut myself? Did you hurt yourself? Did she scratch herself? Etc., right? So as you can see, we have did first, or do if it was in present, or will if it was in future, and you have the subject, the verb, and the reflexive pronoun. Usually after you can have a complement or the question mark. Affirmative answers, yes I did, or yes you did, etc., right? If it's in past, the same thing as I was mentioning before. Reflexive pronouns, negative answers, no I didn't, or depending if it's present or future, it varies, like I told you before. Information questions, the same thing. What did I cut by myself? What did I cut by myself? Some questions what will sound peculiar or weird. So it depends on the context when they would be used, usually in novels or what type of text you're writing or what you're talking about, right? Where did it go to bed by itself? When did we celebrate by ourselves? How did you congratulate by yourselves? And why did they respect by themselves? Notice that here I'm using by because it's a better way when you're using information questions to refer to how the action was done and by who, specifically when you are referring to yourself or to the same reflexive subject. Okay, so now I have some questions. True or false? Let's see if we got a grasp of this topic. Reflexive pronouns are similar to other pronouns. Is that statement true or false? Similar to other pronouns? Reflexive pronouns talk about what an individual or a group does to itself. All the reflexive pronouns end in self. So let's see. So yes, we can say the first one is true. Why? Because reflexive pronouns are, let's say, similar to the possessive pronouns. My, your, him, her. In this case, they are similar to the subject pronouns in those two cases. So you only add self. So I say myself, herself, myself, yourself, themselves, ourselves, right? So they are similar to other pronouns, but you have to pay attention to the cases because in the case of the third person singular, or instead of saying he-self, we say himself, and instead of saying she-self, we say herself, right? Good. And then with the reflexive pronouns, talking about individual groups with itself, so if we're talking about reflexive pronouns, talking about what an individual group does to itself, this is true. That is the objective of our reflexive pronoun, to show how something refers to itself, how it reflects, right? And all the reflexive pronouns end in self. That is false. Why? Because the plural pronouns end in selves. Okay, I hope you learned a lot, and we'll meet again for a new grammar or vocabulary lesson. Take care. Bye.